Welcome once again to Straight Talk. I'm here with, well, I like to say he's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. I've certainly known his parents for a really long time. And his name is Tom Waterhouse. Now, a lot of you guys and girls out there may know the name Waterhouse, but I just want to give you a quick background about him. This young man here is the son of racing royalty, horse racing royalty. In that regard, when it comes to training, yes, that's his mum, Gay Waterhouse, previously Gay Smith, daughter of the famous TJ Smith, Tommy Smith. I'm old enough to remember who Tommy Smith was. I was around in the TJ Smith days. That's his grandfather. And then on his dad's side, it's, I guess, starting from his grandfather, the Waterhouse clan, in terms of bookmaking, as bookmakers, goes back probably beyond your grandfather, I would say.
Yeah, great-grandfather.
Great-grandfathers as well.
Yeah.
And the Waterhouse name is for someone who used to go to the races and actually see people standing there at the races, on the ledger or, etc. And the rails, bookmakers. I mean, I remember that sort of stuff. The Waterhouse name is probably, for me, the most important name that I can remember. It's a name that's sort of pervaded, for a whole lot of reasons, some of which are a bit more colourful than others, pervaded racing forever. And there's an important part of this, and I just want to quickly say it. It's the ability to be able to stand there in front of people and take a bet from somebody, know your mathematical position. And in those days, they used to remember stuff. They used to have a guy called a penciler who used to write these things down. You get a little ticket as to your bet. But you actually be able to work out the mathematics and then to be able to follow data and how, and build a profile around a jockey and a horse relative to all the other horses in a race is quite a skill. And even though this young man here has grown up in that environment, I think on top of that, it just doesn't necessarily follow that you can do those things. So it is an incredibly important skill that this young man here, I would say, has not only inherited, not only been socialised with, but has actually developed himself and has gone about trying to build businesses around that skill. I know his dad and his mum back him heavily. They always support him, but he's gone out on his own. I'm really thrilled to have young Tom Waterhouse in the studio today, and we're going to talk about what he's doing now. But before we do that, I want to talk to him about what he has done in his past and what he learned from that. So, Tom Waterhouse, welcome to Straight Talk, mate. Now, that was a big intro, I know. But I needed to say, because I'm a Tom Waterhouse fan, I'm a Waterhouse family fan. I have to declare, I know a lot of them. I know his brother-in-law as well, quite well, and his sister. So, welcome to the Straight Talk, mate. Let's get straight into it now. Tell me about your previous business, and I'm here to talk about your new business. But what was the previous business? Tell me what it was called.
Well, as you mentioned, Mark, I was so lucky in that I grew up around this family that was deeply rich, had this rich history in horse racing. But most of all, my mum really gave me discipline. She's all about discipline. She just gets up at 2:05 every morning.
Still,
still trains. Been just such a hard worker, never stops, and so I got that from her. And then my dad, he just, even for both my sister and myself, had unlimited belief in us as kids. So it didn't matter what we said we wanted to do. He just backed us all the time. And I was at uni and studying commerce. Didn't think I was going to go into racing at all. Actually didn't like racing.
Is that right?
I hated it. I just thought this is the most boring subject that my parents always talk about. And then my dad said to me when I was in the first 6 months of uni, he goes, "Look, do you want to come and just work out on the bag for me? I need someone to help." And
explain what that means.
So just like going out and holding onto the bag that holds the money.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Look, you might enjoy it. See what you." And within an hour, I went, "This is the best thing I've ever seen." There was just so much action and people asking for huge bets and money flying around. I went, "How come I didn't know about it?" And within 6 weeks, and this is an example of my dad backing me, he said, "Look, I have to go to New Zealand. Do you want to run my stand?" And you can win or lose tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on. And I said, "But I don't know what to do." He goes, "I'll just follow these few simple rules." And all of his clerks and other people couldn't believe he was letting a young 18, 19-year-old boy run a stand. I was so wet behind the ears, had no idea what to do. And he just gave me the keys. And he's done that forever. Just said, "Look, follow these rules. This is a little bit of guidance, but you've got to be thrown in the deep end." And that really was the makings of the beginning of me really been passionate about. I was just lucky. I won the first 18 meetings straight, not through any skill, just because
You better explain what that means, though, because and talk about the stand too. So literally, what are you doing?
You're at the races and punters are whether professional punters or recreational punters are coming up to you and asking for, I don't know, huge bets, and you've got to decide whether to accept the whole bet or accept part of it or change the odds, and I just followed the basic rules he gave me, and just built my confidence up, because I went, oh, well, if my dad believes I can do it, and I've won these few meetings, maybe I can do it. And that confidence...
when you say you won, that means at the end of the day, my mum used to always say you can't beat the books. Basically, what she means, if the bookmaker's any good, they're always going to set the odds such that at the end of the day, at the end of the race, they should win.
The issue with fixed odds is you think you've got percentage in your favour, but you actually don't know if you're actually putting up the correct, giving yourself enough margin. So you've got professional punters out there that are trying to shoot you down, and it's a real skill of trying to make sure that you lay with enough percentage that you can ultimately win. And
when you say you lay, go on.
Lay. So if someone has a bet and you think that the odds of that horse winning is, I don't know, $2.50 or $4, they actually represent percentage. So $2.50 represents 40% chance of winning, $4 represents a 25% chance of winning. So you're basically trying to lay as many of the runners you can, so you basically are around, you're over 100%. And I didn't even know what percentages were as an 18-year-old, and I literally just had my dad's form and these basic rules of only lay these runners, try to only lay them for this amount. That sort of gave me the confidence, and then I worked with my dad as much as I could through uni, and any day I could get free, I'd be with him at the races. And then my grandfather came out of retirement. He was the biggest bookie in the world in the 60s and 70s, and he came out of retirement to teach me the art of bookmaking. And that was an amazing experience, because we fought like cat and dog for 5 years. I thought he was senile, and he thought I was just an arrogant young dickhead or whatever. And I just learned from my dad how to do something. And there's many different ways in business or in bookmaking you can be successful. And he was polar opposite to the way my dad was a bookmaker, in that he was a real gambler, big picture thinker, wanted to bet really big, take everyone on, and I just didn't want to lose. And so we had this sort of 5 years of at loggerhead or at fighting with each other, but then we formed this. I sort of think when you're close with someone, really close with someone, you love them, but you can also show another side of your emotion of that anger and frustration, and that formed a bond of such closeness with my grandfather. And he actually was right about everything, but it took me that period of time to learn myself what he was talking about, and it gave me another side of bookmaking, this big gambling side and big picture thinking. And then I had my dad's form and analytical, and
your dad's very mathematical.
He's he's a mathematical genius.
People tell me that.
Form genius, and so I had they both complemented each other in a way. And then what I thought was, I was hoping I could work with my grandfather for as long as he kept going to the races, and then the taxes changed in New South Wales, and did
you work under his license or your dad's license?
I worked with my dad under his license. I got my own license, and then I worked with my grandfather under his license, and then we formed a partnership together, which we did for 5 years.
You and Bill?
Yeah. And that was just if I could be doing that forevermore, I would have been. And then the taxes changed, and I had to move to Victoria in 2008, and I thought that was just going to be, with the tax increase, I thought that could be the end of the business, and it turned out to be the best thing that
turnover tax.
Yeah, turnover tax increase.
Yep. And state government turnover tax.
Yeah, so because of that, I moved to Victoria. I thought it was only going to be 6 weeks. My mum used to stay at Crown Hotel in Melbourne all the time and said, look, Tom's down for 6 weeks. Can you do a special deal? And I ended up staying for 4 years. And that was really the beginnings of that business fundamentally changing, and also the shift then to tomwaterhouse.com.
So just for everybody listening, I guess it's fair to say you went from standing at a stand at the races in partnership with your grandfather, Bill, to establishing over time an online business called tomwaterhouse.com, which was basically an online business. Was there any physical presence in it as well?
So 2008, there was a tax change in New South Wales, and came down to Melbourne. They could access the internet as bookmakers. So I could access Betfair, which was like having the ticket of the stock market or the stock exchange.
Yep.
And then there was a physical market with the bookmakers.
So you still do the bookmaking?
Still
physical,
and I had my dad's form, and I had all these clients I knew in New South Wales that had a different set of products. So I said, look, I'm in Victoria. I can offer you a product called Best Tote, which they couldn't offer in New South Wales. And I had access to what the market was happening off course because I could have access to a computer. And this sort of little window of time became a really lucrative time to be a bookie because there was a technology change. A lot of the bookies hadn't adapted, had a product advantage, and I had my dad's form. And the business skyrocketed, and I thought, gosh, this is going to be... I'm in the middle of the rails in Melbourne. I was holding more money than all the bookies combined, and we had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 staff and turning over $300 million a year. It was just, I couldn't believe.
How old were you?
26, and I thought, I want to be doing this forever. How good's this? And my grandfather was the last bookie in 1968 that came from Sydney to Melbourne, and I thought, gosh, I followed in his footsteps, and I hope I'm a bookie like this forever. And then within 1 year, they changed the advertising rules. iPhone came out, 3G connection came out, and there was a tremendous shift to online. And so I thought, well, this on course, no one's betting on course. So I shifted to being a telephone-only operator and became a trading house. Had 5 or 6 young 20-year-old guys on their computers, and we would tell all the professional punters, we'll bet you to win 20,000, 50,000. I'll give them a thing. You bet with us first. We traded off the money, and then we had 100 or so good clients, and we'd take their money and basically would trade tough money and keep the good losing money. And that trading business was terrific because there were all these overseas corporate bookmakers coming into the market, and they wanted to bet, they wanted to get business, and so we could trade off the tough money and keep the good money.
What do you mean by the tough money? So in other words...
so there's a group of people like my dad that are professional punters, and they work out what the probability of a horse winning better than the market can.
Yep.
And so we would...
You'd accept their bet?
We'd actively go out to them and say, look, we'll accept your bet.
But you're gonna sell it to someone else.
But we were trading it off,
Yeah.
and using and basically trading that business. And because we were betting so big, all the big punters that weren't necessarily professional go, well, we can get on with Tom.
Yep.
So they'd call up and say, I like 200,000 on this, and we'd accept the person that would generally not have an edge, and we'd know what the true odds to bet them. And then the professional punter would say, Tom, can we have 50,000 on this? We'd say, yeah, you've got that, and we'd shift all the money off to other bookies. And that was...
and just take a clip.
Take a clip, go with them, keep a little bit. It was just a trading house, basically.
So can I just quickly ask you, because I don't understand this stuff, but is the reason you did that is because the marketplace we're talking about, if you're a big punter or you're in the name, in the know, you should be betting with tomwaterhouse.com because that's where all the big professionals go.
And
that helps your reputation.
You'll get on. So we were a place that if you wanted to have a large bet and just get on to speak to, it was only myself and my wife and one other person would pick up the phone. They knew who they were speaking to. They knew if they asked for 100,000 on this, they'd get set. And our job was basically to work out which money we wanted to keep and which money to get rid of. And that was a great business until all the bookies went, well, why do we want to have this winning money coming through us? We'll start reducing the limit. So that business went from being terrific for a 2-year period to being non-existent. And while that was happening, we thought, well, all our customers want to bet online, we better go online. And so we started up tomwaterhouse.com and just thought we'd service our existing 100 customers. But I went on a TV slot with my mum on TVN, which is the racing channel, and we ended up getting 100 sign-ups off it. And I thought, this TV thing works. And Luke, who you know was working at Channel 9, and he said, well, look, do you want to... We can't sell the Rugby World Cup. Do you guys want to go buy it? We can probably give you a discount. And so we bought that, and the TV worked. And we went, gosh, we've got to buy all the live sport. And so we bought the NRL, the AFL, the rugby, the tennis.
I remember.
And bought as much as possible. And we're getting customers. We went from 100 customers to 250,000 customers in 18 months. And that was a wild ride because I've been an on-course bookie. I'd never barely accessed my email. And suddenly we're running a technology online business with 100 people working for us, 250,000 clients. And
a big advertising spend.
And it went from $100,000 advertising spend to 20 million plus a year advertising spend. And that was it was a roller coaster, really interesting and
it gets you sort of sucks you in a bit of a vortex, though, doesn't it?
It was just incredible, the learnings. And
well, you sold it to William Hill, didn't you?
We sold it to William Hill, and that was an amazing journey to sell. They bought a whole bunch of companies. They bought 2 companies. They bought Sporting Bet and Centrebet, paid like $700 million for them, and we were just a small add-on, because what we had different to those companies, which were that we had a low cost per acquisition, we acquired customers more cheaply, and we had these advertising properties. And so I'm suddenly going from never having a job into corporate world, and I just kept writing to the global CEO, because we were on an earn-out as part of the deal. Look, if I was running this business, I think you should do this, this, and this, because obviously we want the business to go as well as possible, get as much of the earn-out as possible. And he turned around a few months in and he goes, look, if you've got all these bright ideas, why don't you run all these businesses for us? So I'd gone from on-course booker 2 years before to this roller coaster, TomWaterhouse.com, to suddenly running this $2 billion plus turnover. They paid $700 million business we had 500 people in office in Tel Aviv and Manila and all over Australia. And
how old were you at this stage?
so that would have been 30, 31, so it was, and that was, my parents said, look, what are you doing taking a job? Don't get the earn out as much as you can and get out of there. And because no one in my family, none of them, they all work for themselves. But I thought that it was just an experience, because they operate differently, as you know. Big businesses operate differently to startups or family businesses, and I loved it. I really enjoyed working for a big company and seeing how different they were, and what the advantages were coming from a family business or a startup business, and that was a really interesting period. And then luckily, we sold that business to the Stars Group and was able to buy back Tom Waterhouse as part of that deal. Yeah, the name, and that was just to be able to sell the business in 2 years of starting it, to then be able to work for that company and be the CEO of their businesses, and then buy the business back was just great.
Your dad, Robbie, I have a tremendous amount of respect for his skills and ability, and I actually think, particularly now he's much older than going back 30 years ago, I think his counsel for his son in particular would be, like invaluable in this industry, right?
I call my dad non-stop. I ask him about everything, because he's just so wise and he's got so much experience. And
but he's very purposeful and thoughtful too. Yeah. He doesn't just blurt the answer out.
No, he's 100 times smarter than me. So I just literally everything.
Why? He's really smart though. He is.
Yeah, he's so switched on.
But everyone tells me. And you can. The few times I've spoken to him, he looks like he's thinking. Yeah. Like he's sort of about 5 steps ahead of you in his thinking process. He's not very noisy. He doesn't say much.
No, he's just ultra switched on, so well read. Like he's got 1,000 books all over his desk. He's. I've learned from all parts, but having my dad there as a mentor and getting all the lessons off him, and also my grandfather. Yeah, look, I sort of say to guys in the office, I'm not really doing anything that I've made up. I'm just sort of the lessons they've learned, trying to adapt it to what's happening in the environment now. Yeah, I'm just obviously lucky coming from the family that I've come from, and just trying to make the most of it.
But going through that process of Tom Waterhouse, but TomWaterhouse.com, lots of people out there are, be thinking themselves, I want to do a startup, or I'm in the middle of a startup, or I'm going to sell to someone overseas or locally. What are some of the lessons you learned, the harsh lessons, the tough lessons that you learned during that process? I mean, what could you share with us?
Look, I think that one of the biggest lessons that I learned was the ability to be nimble, and one of the benefits of being a startup is that you basically go off the smell of an oil rag. You go, well, how can I generate revenue, and how do I keep the costs so I can just keep in business for as long as the revenue goes up, and in whether it was the on-course bookmaking business or the telephone business or the tipping business that I'm in now or the odds comparison business, all those businesses, I run them ultra lean. We have a very small team of highly skilled people, but don't expand. TomWaterhouse.com, because we were in that environment of an expanding market that just opened up with marketing, we got really big quick. And that was an amazing journey and turned out to be, luckily, a really great outcome to sell to William Hill. But it's a scary environment to be in, where you're growing your cost base at a greater rate than your revenue.
Yeah.
And that is
And you get sort of locked into it too.
You get, and it becomes you sort of, to keep that growth going and to keep the business where you've got to keep spending. And
it requires capital.
yeah, and we were very lucky to sell to William Hill and do that deal, because we bit off more than we could chew in many ways in terms of advertising spend for a business so small. And so at the start of the journey, we were trying to keep up with the likes of Tabcorp or Sportsbet or Ladbrokes. These are huge multinational billion-dollar companies, and we're like a small family operation just 18 months into the journey.
It's an interesting thing, because I mean, the same thing happened with me and Kerry when we had the Wizard business. In the end, even Kerry, man, like he said to me, like, we can't compete with the banks. We can't, we can't keep funding these businesses. The Wizard business got too big for us.
Yeah.
And too big for Kerry Packer at the time, when he was the richest man in Australia at the time. So it's, I think our listeners are going to understand, you've got to be careful what you wish for. You want to be really big and all that sort of stuff. When you get to that point, you've got to then make a decision. How do I continue on? And do I bring in partners? Do I sell out completely? And those processes, I think you need to start thinking about that at the beginning and prepare yourself. And maybe you don't need to grow as fast or at as faster rate. Maybe you can control things a bit better, because sometimes it feels like, to me anyway, it used to feel like to me that I was drinking water through a fire hose.
Yeah.
And I just, and even Kerry, he pulled me up. He said, look, son, look, we have to sell this business. It's just got too big, which is why we sold to General Electric, because they had a big enough balance sheet. They were the world's largest company at the time. They had a big enough balance sheet to compete with the banks. Like you just said, your business needed a balance sheet to be able to compete with the Ladbrokes and all those other big, massive organisations in the world, global organisations. And a Waterhouse family is well off, but not that well off, relatively speaking. By the way, why would you want to throw your capital at it anyway?
Yeah, well,
because it's your family capital.
My dad and my aunt Louise, they both said, look, believe in the business, that's fantastic, but you can't really expect to sell property or sell assets to put into an internet startup.
Things you spent your whole life building.
Yeah, which you've got a level of safety. You don't need. Why are you playing? You don't need to hit a home run. Life's good.
Yeah.
And that
that's sobering.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good lesson in that I'm having bets all the time in business, but I'm basically not going all in terms of like, well, if it doesn't work, it's the end of everything, because you've just got to stay in play all the time. I think in startups, if you can keep trying stuff and pushing stuff, well, some of them are going to be great, some of them are not going to be not that good, and if you can stay in play, well, you'll be around long enough that you have enough good ones. And
I think that's a really important thing, Tom, because like I've sort of been through the process myself. So you get to bring shit. Maybe I should stay with this because this is the greatest thing of all time, and you get a bit sort of carried away with yourself. At least in my case, I did. And you think to yourself, I'm wedded to this idea, but actually you sell it off. Let someone else run with it at whatever point it is that you feel as though you should sell it, and then if you're relevant and smart enough and energized enough, you can actually start again, do something else again. I mean, sometimes some people just are about setting up businesses, running with them, and then if they get too large, there's nothing wrong with selling to somebody else or listing it or bringing in a partner. If it doesn't get to that stage, you can sit with it forever because it's manageable. It's got to be something that's manageable. You can't let it control your life. I want to talk about what you're doing now. So when you sell these businesses, normally you get put on a restraint.
Yep.
So they restrain you for a number of years. They don't want you to compete with them.
Yep.
Everyone, you're going to understand this. If you sell your business for a big price to somebody else, the last thing they're going to let you do is go up, take the money and walk off and reestablish yourself. They normally put you on what they call a restraint of trade. And it can be somewhere between 2 and 10 years. You got put on a restraint, yep?
I did, yeah. So I 2 years, I got the brand back, but on the condition that I couldn't offer any betting services for 2 years.
Right. Anywhere in Australia, anywhere in the world?
It was actually only anywhere in Australia.
Right.
And so I thought, well, what can I do with the brand? And tossed up whether it was FX business or syndication business and all these different. And I thought, my dad's been a professional punter for over 40 years. I saw through my time with William Hill and being a bookie, the majority of customers or punters, they don't win. It's entertainment for them. So I thought, well, the largest market in this space are people that don't actually win betting. And I've been grown up around my dad and his friends that actually win. And there's a few key things to winning at betting. You need to analyse the form, so come up with what the true probability is. You need to know how much to have on the horse, so how confident you are, your stake. and then you need to get on at the top of the market. It's like buying stocks. You need to get on at the lowest price you can. You need to get on at the best price you can when you're betting. And most people don't even think about that or know that. And then it requires discipline to stick to that. And so I thought, well, look, if I can use the brand and try and be the punter's pal or make members better betters, maybe I can get 100 customers and it'll just tick the brand over. It'll pay for the server costs and up the upkeep and a few ads and stuff. And launched it the day after I left William Hill, and just put it together with a mate. It took a few hours to put it up on Squarespace and just put it out there. And
what was it called?
Just tomwaterhouse.com. But it was just a tipping business, like a couple of packages, and you can get tips every Saturday. And then some journalist wrote an article going, basically, what an idiot, who's going to buy these tips? And we got...
What a subscription was it?
Yeah, subscription. We got a couple of hundred customers in the first day, and it turned out to be really popular. And so we had packages ranging from $15 a week up to $120,000 a year. And that's been really interesting to be on the other side, and been running that, and will continue to run that, and really enjoy basically being the punter's pal, showing them how they can be better at betting. And thought, well, how do I complement that business? And I loved a business called Dynamic Odds that was an odds comparison site for basically professional or more savvy punters, and always used that to compare the odds and make sure I was getting on. I thought, well, what about if I can give to the people that are on my app and on website that are getting the tips, if I can provide an in-app, basically like the Trivago or the bookings.com of betting inside the app.
So just so I can put it in my terms, maybe punters, everyone else's terms, pardon the pun, aggregate on one place all the odds that you can get on a horse in a particular race, for example.
Exactly, across all the different, because there's 20 plus corporate bookmakers, and everyone knows, like when you do all the surveys, they're like, oh, what's important to me? Getting the best price. But no one can be bothered to take their money out of their tab account or their Sportsbet account because Ladbrokes is offering 5 cents better or 10 cents better. They go, look, I know it's better that I do it, but can I be bothered withdrawing, then depositing, then doing the verification, then doing the sign up?
Yeah, getting registered. There's friction.
I'll just have my $20 or $50 and I'm getting 10 cents worse, but it's easy.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I can give a seamless thing that they've got one sign up, one password, one verification process, and they just come to the app and they can bet across wherever's the best, well, they might bet on Ladbrokes for half their bets, and they might bet on Sportsbet, a quarter of them, they might bet on Tab, some of them, but they're actually going to be all the time giving themselves that little bit more of an edge. And that's what we aim to do, and it's only just started, but it's proved really popular.
Just tell us what it's called, though. So it's
it's just Tom Waterhouse. In the App Store, you just go to Tom Waterhouse, or tomwaterhouse.com, or it's just Tom Waterhouse.
And is it a free sign up, or you pay it?
It's free, yeah.
Free sign up, and then you subscribe, though.
If you want the tips, you can get tips for free.
Yep.
But if you want to get, as the packages go up, you pay for the tips. But I don't actually, and you probably go, what an idiot guy. I don't know how to monetize the odds comparison yet, but I just think that you can generate a lot of traffic.
That's valuable in itself.
It's valuable in itself, and also if I think about it from the tipping business, it's making the members better betters, because they'll automatically go, well, if it's in front of them 10 different or 20 different bookies, why wouldn't they just take the best price?
I guess when you're doing your tips, someone's doing a form for you.
Yep.
And someone would be also looking at what everybody's offering at the same time. You're doing it anyway.
And every time we set out the tips, we say, look, we think that you should be backing this horse at 460. This is the bookies that are offering 460 at the moment. This is who's offering 440. This is offering 420. So we outline it, but they've got to then go, oh, okay, I've got the tip, and then go to wherever we've recommended
and register and
register and.
So you're giving them a gateway to do what you're telling them anyway.
Exactly.
So it's not a lot of extra work other than the gateway.
Exactly right.
So you had to build a gateway. So whether you can work out how to commercialize that or monetize that in near future, I guess will be dependent on how popular it is, and where the various parts are that you make a quid out of. But if you can't, it doesn't really matter that much to me.
No, it's an add-on to the tipping business.
It's an add-on, 100%.
Yeah.
So it's really the tipping business where the money's made.
Yeah.
So how big? I want to know, how big's your team now? This is a technology play.
So I sort of, through that experience with everything from when I was working with my dad to my grandfather to down in Melbourne to the telephone business, has always been just half a dozen people. And one of the things that coming out, I loved working for William Hill and running that business here for them. A 500-person organisation, as you would know, is there's so many challenges outside of actually running the core business.
Yeah, managing people.
Managing people's and I sort of thought that I wanted to get a group of 6 to 8 people that I go, well, I hope I work with them for 10, 20 years. Hopefully they want to work with me, but people that are 2 unbelievable developers and person that's been running the finances and financials for Waterhouse.com and then William Hill and to people that are managing all the customer service, to people that are managing the trading side of things, and just have a very small team of 8 people that we use as our core of whether we invest in other businesses and we go into other parts, but they're the core team of who stick and hopefully will be that size for a long time to come. And then if we've invested in other business or doing other things, then we'll ramp up in terms of a team here that we'll invest in, but that our core business isn't managing 20, 30, 50, 100 people.
Or 500 people. I guess I've got to ask you this question, because I experienced myself, but and people out there, we've held masterclasses on public relations, how do you manage this sort of stuff. Racing is a colourful industry. You and I have had discussions about this, about people we know in common and various other things where, the colour tends to be the wrong colour. And it is sometimes embarrassing, sometimes it's sort of semi-threatening, sometimes it's just gossipy. But nonetheless, it's sort of interesting. And racing is one of those industries, or gambling is one of those industries that draws the colour in, and to some extent, it makes it exciting for me anyway, as an onlooker. But you've been involved in it, as a kid, and as an adult to some extent. You've also experienced negativity in the press, as I have. For me, I don't give a fuck because I just roll with it now. I've been around so long, I don't give a shit. But you're a younger man. You've got 3 young kids.
Yep.
And you've got a wife, and you've got your reputation, which is really important to you. How do you feel? And then again, and on top of that, how do you deal with negativity or the darkness that sometimes can get presented to you?
To me, I'm passionate about being in business, and I think that's from passed on with the family that. Everything, like my mum always said when I was a kid, I don't care what you do, but if you're working hard, I'll be happy, and this work ethic of my grandfather went to the office 7 days a week until basically nearly passed away. My aunt, my dad, my mum, they were just hard workers. And so for me, family, number one, but the only other thing that really I'm passionate about is business. And so if the business is going great, it doesn't matter to me what people that I don't know say about me. It might, if my wife, during that NRL period, when I'd see my wife, she's like, have you seen all this stuff? That's a little bit, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, I've seen it. But it doesn't bother me at all, people that I don't know. When I went through that journey with William Hill being an executive, I was constantly saying to myself, how good's this? No one knows me. I never get stopped in the street. No one ever says anything bad. And I'm just under the radar. I want to do this forever. And then when I got the brand back, I was like, well, even if I'm in the top 10% of CEOs, which I wasn't, but let's say I was in top 30%, I'm competing with all these people. And like your intro at the beginning, I've been blessed or so lucky to have the background, the name, the family history, the heritage in this space. And if I actually wanted to try and get the best business outcome of growing a business, I've got to utilize the advantage that I've got. There's not many people that have had that background or the history in this gambling space, and so I take the advantage of that. And if you're not prepared to, if you're prepared to take the upside and the benefit of having the brand and the name and being a polarizing, doing it as an individual, well then you've got to be able to. You can't really say, oh well, I like that, but I can't take this. You've got to suck it up. And I think as you've done with yourself, if being an individual and promoting yourself an individual in formats like this or anything to do with social media, the media landscape's dramatically changed in the last 5-10 years. And there's such a power of promoting as an individual rather than Yellow Brick Road, or as Sportsbet or sports betting or TAB Sportsbet. They all sound similar. But if you can be an individual and say, well, look, this is what I'm about, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm trying to do, it's more authentic. And so there's good and bad bits with it, but I sort of go, well, I can always cope with the bad if I think it's the right business decision to grow the business.
You take, I always say just take the sweets or the sours, but I'm older, and I know when I was younger, I remember a few times. I remember, I won't say a name, but a particular journalist who wrote a column, which is in those days a fairly well-read column, made some assertions that I was doing the wrong thing by my wife at the time. It was just total nonsense. But she'd been fed this by somebody else. And I remember it just got to me so bad. My wife was unhappy. All of a sudden I'm explaining myself about something I shouldn't have had to explain myself about. So I actually couldn't resist it. So I'm like this. So I rang the journalist up and I arranged to have lunch with her. Because I said, look, you never met me and you're writing rubbish about me. So front up and see me. And I was like really angry, like extraordinarily angry about it. Because it caused me, I had 4 kids at the time, amazing amount of stress. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to my wife. I wasn't embarrassed, but it was embarrassing to my wife. And it wasn't true either. And but my way of dealing was to confront people. And which was probably the wrong thing to do because the lunch didn't go very well. And probably what I did do is I managed to create a permanent enemy for myself, who happened to be a journalist, which is never good at any time. And fortunately, she retired from journalism or moved on to somewhere else. I don't know whatever happened, but it was the wrong way to go about things. I didn't have anybody advising me. I mean, my parents haven't gone through. Well, my mum maybe, but my dad certainly hasn't gone through experiences that your dad and mum and grandfather have gone through. So I never really had any counsel on those sorts of things. I think that out of that, what I would say to anyone listening is that it's better to have Tom's attitude. Don't be aggressive. Don't push back. For me, just roll with it. I know that's the way I am today, but roll with it no matter when. Always roll with it. Just, as Tom says, you've got to take the good with the bad. If you're going to have the good, you're going to enjoy the good, you're going to have to cop it on the chin. But don't react. Would that be fair?
My dad always says today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper.
Yeah, that's an old. My mum used to say it, funnily enough, yeah.
And people, they've got such short memories because everyone's got busy lives that everything's happening, and they might be interested in your life for a millisecond, but no one really gives two hoots about anyway. They're not interested,
No.
And as long as you keep moving forward and you've got doing the next thing and new things, well, I can't remember it.
I guess you get this sense of unfairness. I mean, I had this. I mean, maybe the reason I set up the Wizard business in the first place because I felt like banks were unfair to people, and one of the reasons I wanted to sort of, let's call it, democratise mortgages is because I thought it was a fair thing to do. I still have this thing of unfairness. I mean, it exists today in politics. We've got the left and we've got the right and we've got the hell of a lot of people in the middle who don't get represented by anybody. And by the way, the people sitting in the middle don't even think about what the left or right are doing. They're not even interested in what's going on in the news or the newspapers or on Sky News or whatever. They just don't listen to it. They're probably having a bet with you. They're probably more interested in having a bet on a Saturday and going to the footy and enjoying their families. That sense of unfairness, you've got to be careful you don't let your view of unfairness, in my case, my view of what is unfair, affect the way I react. An old lawyer guy who I was in partnership with many years ago, Tom, he was a senior partner of the firm, said, and I think it's right, don't get angry, just get even. And wait your time.
Yeah.
And one way of getting even is you don't react.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get you to react.
It's very difficult also in your situation when it impacts your family.
Yeah, totally.
Like if people are slinging money at you as a person, well, you know who you are.
Yeah, I'll cop that.
But it's a different situation.
If they're saying something that affects my wife,
yeah,
and you just, I mean, even today, I'm not married, but even today, I would still probably react. I would do it in a different way. I would try to get even. But I guess you got to do is don't be emotional in business. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make here. And I think this guy here comes from an environment I think his dad, Robbie's had plenty of opportunities to be angry, but he's so poised.
Yeah, I can't remember ever seeing my dad ever angry in my life.
He's fully poised. Mum's a bit different.
Yeah, she would confront the journalist just like you.
Totally. She'd lay him out. But Robbie's so poised. He's nearly mathematical in the way he approaches everything. Would that be right?
No, he is.
And you're I mean, and what's interesting is you're sort of the best of, or becoming the best of everything of both.
I
of
don't
them.
know about that.
That's important. I mean,
I definitely look up to both my parents, and try and have tried to learn as much as possible. But everyone stuffs up, don't they? You know, like it doesn't matter who you are.
100%.
You're always going to make mistakes, and you can never get the best of all of them because you're always going to make your own stupid decisions and
when
mess up.
When you do the good things, they're going to give you a pat in the head. And when you do the bad things, they're going to come try and give you an uppercut. And I mean, you're a dad now. How old are your kids?
7, 4, and 2.
Is the Waterhouse story going to filter through to the kids? Any of the kids shown any interest?
Look, they're probably a bit young, but I definitely try and put into them an entrepreneurial mindset of being in business. What business are you going to start when you're older? What are you thinking about? What do you
really
like?
say that? You say it?
Yeah, my daughter, who, when she was like 5, started like little toy shop going to sell toys, and like she sort of putting that sort of environment. And I take them to the office every Sunday. They don't do anything at the office except for like colouring on the whiteboard. But I know with my parents, they work 7 days a week. So they go to the office, or I go be at the stables. I worked every Sunday from the age of 11 or 12 onwards there. Just that business is part of your life. I'm not saying you have to do this, or I don't talk in detail of like, oh, this is how you do this or whatever, but just trying to instill them to think that they're going to be a business owner and run their own business, and that working's really important and making money is important. And I don't know if that's the right parenting. I just got it from my parents. So I found it important for me. So I'm just trying to pass it on. Probably in 20 years' time, I don't know, they're not doing any of that, but you just don't know.
But it doesn't matter, I guess, in the end of the day.
It's whatever they want to do.
Well, can I ask you, how important is, I don't know your wife, but how is it important for you as a person who comes from this environment, and to some extent it's nearly expected of at least your generation to carry on the family business, to have a wife who accepts it, understands it, supports it? I'm not just saying she's sitting there supporting you, like, you know, that type of thing, but at least supports your undertaking. No doubt you support her undertakings, but how important is that? I mean, and you know, this is an important question, because you gotta, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to be married or in partnership with someone and have a family, you have to get all that shit sorted. That's really important. You have to be conscious of it, acknowledge it, be conscious of it, and actually be active in the way you go about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, like my wife, before we were boyfriend and girlfriend, like when we started Tom Waterhouse, I went into that office environment. The first 2 people that worked for me, I caught them stealing. So I had to sack them on the spot, and I didn't want to because I didn't have anyone to do it. And she was studying architecture, and she literally dropped that, still carried on, but like didn't go to the lectures or whatever, and came down to Melbourne and helped me until we hired new people on. And up until we had our baby, she was working all the time within Tom Waterhouse, so to have that support, understanding, she's an incredible wife, and seeing those qualities that she would drop everything and help. I was like, well, you need to find that person that you not only you love and want to spend time with, but also so supportive. And I was saying to a mate of mine who is single and doing really well with his career, I said, look, I admire your discipline, because there's something, when you find the right woman and you have kids, there's something quite soothing in that allows you to focus on work and really, I think, dedicate that, or have that dedication to excel in that area. And then when you don't have that, and I've got to sort this part of my life out. Who am I going out with now, and what am I doing? And then to still have that discipline in your work environment, I said, look, you've got so much more discipline than me, because that area of my life I think about all the time, because they're my family and they're the most important things in my life. But I have that comfort that I know I've got the right wife, I love my kids more than anything. Okay, now let's focus on business. It's an amazing thing, finding the right woman and having a family.
I think for me, the basics of all my everything I do in my life is about my family. Everything, particularly about my kids. And now I've got a grandson, so my grandson who's now 2. Hey, Georgie. But I'm lucky. My dad's still alive, and so we got 4 generations of, for my dad, myself, my son, and his son. We got 4 generations there, and to me, I mean, I never thought about this when I was younger, to be frank with you. But to me, the most important thing is your family structure. You don't have to necessarily be married or not married, or you can be divorced, or just being settled.
Yeah.
And having an environment that you feel comfortable with is really important. And I do know that your family is extraordinarily close. I mean, your family's actually sort of blessed in some regards. Mum and Dad, Robbie and Gay, they just keep it together. They keep the whole family together. Your sister Kate and Luke, and I mean, it's sort of one of the great stories, to be honest with you. What your mum and dad have done is sort of nothing short of brilliant, I think. And what you're doing is, I mean, as a young man, like I have a son your age, and like as a parent, what you're doing is brilliant. I mean, it's very, very good, and you should be. I know you're grateful, but you should just realise, I'm sure Mum and Dad are extremely proud of what you do. I'm sure I know they're proud of what Kate does as well. But
Kate, as you know, like she's a full-time mum, but a full-time career. I actually look at her and I go, how in the hell do you juggle? I'm so much more in awe of that because I have that area sorted. My wife does this and does that and has everything sorted that it's just easy. I love just being home playing with the kids. Kate does all of that. Luke works full time. She works full time, and still is a superstar mum. It's
But you come from one of those. Just as I said, it was a gift earlier. But you come from one of those blessed families. And it's not some privilege. I mean, like no one throws stuff around to you guys. I mean, you guys were you were dragged along to work all the time. I mean, you can sit around and tell someone what they should be doing, but you got to show them what they got to be doing. And by taking your kids and by you being taken by your parents to their work and to see them working 7 days a week, I don't care what someone says. Someone could say to you all their life, you got to work 7 days a week, Tom. You won't work 7 days a week unless you saw your mum and dad work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
It's what you see is what you do.
Yeah.
And, I'm like that with my kids, and my father was like that with me. I mean, nothing as illustrious as your parents, but my dad did work 7 days a week too. He was a fencer on weekends and worked in a factory during the week, but I still saw him work 7 days a week, which means why I work 7 days a week. I'm always working because I'm like, I love working. I enjoy it. I don't know what I could do. I don't know what I would do with myself if I didn't have my family and my work. They're the two most important things for me. That's all that matters. If you could leave us with one thing that you've learned from being in business in your short but extremely busy period of life, what's one thing you would tell our listeners? One thing you've learned? What's one really acute lesson that you've learned? You could have got hurt or you could have benefited from it, but what's one thing?
So I think my grandfather always said everything works out for the best if you let it. And I thought, oh, well, gosh, tomwaterhouse.com, I wanted to keep it forever. And why? There was a lot of things when selling it, even though from a financial point of view, it was a great outcome for a short period. We only had the business for a very short period of time. I was like, a part of me felt really sad to be letting it go. But I think life's a series of journeys, it's so exciting to have different paths and see different things. And constantly he would say, oh, it'll work out for the best. Everything works out for the best if you let it and you make the most of it. And sometimes, like with the NRL, there was a huge amount of backlash, but it catapulted the brand to being very well known. That's allowed me to go and build other businesses off that brand, and selling it allowed me to have that experience with William Hill. And there's going to be a stack of bad stuff, but if you keep driving forward, you'll go, gosh, I had the battle scars of that, or I had the experience of that. And
so what would you say to people? What would you say to all the little businesses, or right now in Melbourne or in Victoria, who are doing it extraordinarily tough? What would you say to them in that regard, and what you just said?
I think in terms of often until circumstances come about, you go, I'll just stick to it, because it's so easy to stick to the same thing that's quite good. And obviously they're in such a tough situation, so it's not really right of me to say, oh, this is my advice to you, because I haven't been in that. That's an extraordinary, difficult period. Imagine those people with restaurants and services businesses there. So I sort of feel stupid saying to them, oh, you should be doing it. But these poor circumstances, it may be the sort of dramatic change they needed to make their business evolve, or try something else, or do something else. And again, maybe it's not, I don't know their businesses themselves, but I always try and think when something bad happens, well, that's forced me to do this or change this differently. I probably would have been easy just to stay an exec for 10 or 20 years. And now I think, well, gosh, that sale is such a blessing, because they sold William Hill to the Stars Group. I got the brand back. I had to get out and roll up my sleeves.
But at the time you thought, shit.
I was like, well, will I be able to start up a business again? Will this work, or will this not? You just sort of don't know. And leaving the on-course business, I was like, I just love this. This is what my grandfather's taught me, or my dad's taught me. will this work? And the first day sitting in office waiting for the phones to ring, I'm like, are they going to ring? But it was the best decision ever. And then the next, I just always think that when they lifted the taxes in New South Wales, I went, oh, this is the end of that business. But it forced me to go to Melbourne. And every time there's been something really bad, it's forced to change. And if you're prepared to roll up your sleeves and work hard, often that change can be a benefit. And
so you would say, no matter what, for our people in Victoria, in the initial stage, you will live in fear. We all live in fear. I mean, we have the fear of the unknown. You had the fear of the unknown when they changed taxes. We were fearful. But I think at some stage, you've got to turn that fear into hope, and hope that something good's going to come out of it, and then just work your ass off to make sure something does come out of it, something good.
I was terrified to go back into business again. I was exec. They sent a check in your account or they sent money in your account every month. You're like, how easy is this? I get to go home on weekends and chill out with the family. I don't want to go back in my own business where I'm like, don't get any money in my account. I've got to actually spend money to generate a business. It's terrifying in a way, but it was the best thing that I could never imagine now going back to go into corporate life. But those jolts often help you. And again, people in Victoria, that they're suffering much more than I can't even think to compare what they're going through to what I've done. So they're in a really difficult position. But that's just what I've tried to take from my grandfather.
Well, I'm sure you'll join with me on this. To our Victorian colleagues, we wish you the very best. We hope that you are constrained for the shortest possible period, and we hope you come out of it better than before you went into it. So, and with that, I want to thank Tom Waterhouse. I want to say it's been for me a great pleasure to talk to you again. I haven't seen you for a while, but a great pleasure to talk to you again, and I wish you the very best with the Tom Waterhouse app.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Mark.
Welcome, mate.